Hello, Simone. I'm excited to be here with you today. Today, we are going to be discussing an article that has done the rounds in conservative media. I saw it before it did the rounds. I was like, we should do an episode on this, but it makes more sense for evergreen content, which was a New York Times piece titled, "Men, Where Have You Gone? Please Come Back."
Huh?
So many men retreated from intimacy, hiding behind firewalls, filters, and curated personas, dabbling and scrolling. We miss you.
What?
I mean,
They're here. They're right here.
No, they actually have left the environments that these women are within.
Oh, they're not on Blue Sky.
Well, no, it's not that they're not on Blue Sky. They're not dating in the way that these women are dating. They're not dating in the environments that these women are dating. I will note, while a lot of right-wingers have covered this particular article, I think they have missed the larger point in it just to make the dunks they want to make. Like, oh, feminists pushed us out. This is all women's fault. You know, women are the worst. When I really think there is an interesting thing to describe here, which is what we're going to go into, which is why don't you see men at restaurants anymore? Why don't you see men in these sorts of fancy environments anymore? This isn't just downstream of what we think of as big bad misandry. And so what we are seeing is the perception of what dating is like for one of these post-feminist women in an environment, because this woman is in her 50s.
She's in her 50s and she's dating?
She's got kids. She's previously married. She's done this whole thing before. So she is contrasting dating today with what dating was like in the past.
Oh.
And you can say, oh, well, you know, she's post-wall. The thing is that when you're in your 50s, you're so post-wall, you're no longer in the shock of, I'm 35 and why won't men date me anymore? I think that she is actually cataloging a difference in dating marketplaces between now and what the marketplaces were like 30 years ago. Or 20 years ago, right? And I think that what we see from this piece, really interestingly, is sort of the decimation feminism has wrought upon her generation and the generation that attempted to espouse it, but not just feminism, but sexual liberation. And a lot of people have written like follow-up pieces like, oh, this is great. Like, men, you really should re-engage. And a lot of people are like, bro, men should not be having casual sex in their 50s. Like, you know, this is clearly like not good advice, right? Like, this woman is searching for something that only harms everyone that she engages with. So let's dig into it. By the way, I looked up a picture of the author. She's not like terrible looking or anything. She's fine, especially for a 50-year-old.
Well, I mean, typically if you're a contributor to the New York Times, like you're a fairly high class, like upper class, educated, successful person. So that should not.
Which in your mind means skinny?
I think obesity probably is higher with lower income levels. Yeah.
True. But not lower about the online writer types. You know, there's lots of them out there. You know, it could be. Anyway. May 17th, a warm Saturday night in Wicker Park, a vibrant stretch of Chicago where 7 restaurants crowd a single block. Tori and I are having dinner at Mama Delia, one of the quieter spots. The sidewalk patio held 5 tables, 3 two-tops, including ours, and a pair pulled together for a group of 8 women. At those tables, Troy was the only man. The scene was beautiful, low lights, shared plates, shoulders angled in, the kind of evening people wait for all winter. Still, I found myself watching the crowd as it moved past us. Women walking in pairs or alone, dressed with care. At table after table at the nearby restaurants, there was a noticeable absence of men, at least men seated in what looked like dates. Now, this is really fascinating to me. And we're going to be talking about other anecdotal evidence from her, but it's something that I have seen as well, especially in fancy cities like New York, Chicago, stuff like this. These are the environments where men have seen the most benefit from just leaning out of the dating market if they're not in the top 1 or 2%.
Yeah.
This is a reminder for people who don't know, the average man on male in terms of attractiveness gets swiped right on by less than 1% of women. Women are completely delusional around what their market value is around this stuff, especially if they're also engaging in casual sex, which you can see this woman is. So she is likely, like many of these other women, saying, I just will not date men of this category. When you go out and you push for equal salaries for men and women, and then you say, well, and I want a man that earns more than me, that means that half or more than half of women, especially in urban environments where they're overwhelming women and where women earn more than men, are going to be single.
Yeah.
And the question is what are men doing, right? Well, I can imagine very few men who would get any satisfaction from going out and eating alone at a restaurant. I can imagine very few men who want to hang out with a group of men at a restaurant where they are overpaying for food and alcohol.
Yeah, especially these days, restaurants are so expensive.
Restaurants are about signaling something to yourself
Mhm.
and to other people.
Yeah.
So where are the groups of men going? They are going to the other men's houses to play LAN parties and stuff like that.
Or if they're eating out, maybe it's like a sports bar where it's more of like a social fun environment where there's a game playing. I could see that.
Yeah, but it is not fancy restaurants. There is no reason a man would do this.
No, and now fancy restaurants are like increasingly for Instagram and for the photos. And
Well, it's not just Instagram. It's so that this woman could signal something to herself about who she is and the type of life she's living. And you see this all the way back in Sex and the City, is that they would often meet at fancy restaurants, whereas no male group would ever meet at fancy
my
restaurants.
gosh, the feminization of restaurants, underrated.
Well, there's no reason to, right? A man only takes a woman to a fancy restaurant so she can masturbate this perspective of herself as like this high class.
Yeah, because a man's door dashing, if anything, like if he has to eat out.
Yeah, this is about how she sees herself. And we're going to see this in the next thing here, which is that even when men aren't taking her to these environments, she still feels forced to go to them herself to reframe this self-image of herself as living a good life. So it started to become clear the previous April when a man who had been pursuing me canceled a dinner at the last minute. There was a scheduling mixed up with his son's game. I understood. I am a hockey mom. I get it. So first, we're learning a few things. She's dating guys who have kids, which is good because she has kids, right? Like,
yeah.
That's more fair. And she considers it. What's her daughter doing? How is she able to go out and go to these? Maybe her daughter's with the dad at these times. I don't know. Still, I went. I wore what would have been worn anyway. I took the table, I ordered well, and I watched the room. Only 2 tables nearby seemed to hold actual dates. The rest were groups of women or women alone with each other occupying space with quiet confidence. No shrinking, no waiting, no apologizing. I love it how she feels the need. Like she can tell how depressing what's happening is for women. And
she was stood up. She goes out anyway.
Well, not just that, but she sees a bunch of other women who are doing the same thing, like going out anyway. And she needs to go into this whole with quiet confidence, no shrinking, no waiting, no apologizing. And it's like, no, they're being depressing and pathetic. And you don't want it framed that way for yourself, but that's the reality of it. That night marked something, not a heartbreak, but an unraveling. A sense that what I'd been experiencing wasn't just personal misalignment. It was something broader, cultural, a slow vanishing presence. And she's talking about men in the world. But what she means is men who are willing to engage with women in this way, take them to fancy, expensive restaurants and stuff like that. I did that early in our relationship, but we stopped that pretty soon within our relationship. That really only makes sense within the earliest of dating because it's such an expensive waste of money. I mean, no matter how much money you have, it should make you ill if you're like a reasonable person.
No, we cut it out real quick. Actually, how many times did we actually go out to dinner? There was the first night, Indian food.
We went, remember, for meat at some sort of sausage place because
that's because we got ribs, but that was just because you were like, please don't be vegetarian anymore. It wasn't even dinner, it was like lunch. We really didn't eat out much. I mean, our second date was at your house.
Yeah, and I'm cooking there. So
wow.
Yeah, not this is the other thing is that real guys, the type of guys you'd want to marry, they take a girl out once and they don't do it again. And
well, I mean, especially if they dated as much as you did, and that means that you had to make it financially sustainable. So you'd like maybe do a dinner and then you'd do like a picnic or you do some kind of other outing.
Yeah.
Like make mixed drinks at your house because you like sort of built up a really big bar and then that made you capable of having like a really like choice filled cocktail hour at your place. instead
But
of a
she
full dinner.
wanted guys who were gonna reinforce this perception she had of herself and what dating is
Huh.
in a really financially unsustainable way. If you're a guy and you're taking a woman out to a fancy restaurant, like in Chicago or something like this, you're paying $20 a drink often, at least $10 a drink.
Mhm.
I mean, if she's getting cocktails, 20. You keep in mind plus tip here. Then for entrees, $30 maybe,
It's
20, 30.
insane. Yeah.
And so, for the whole meal, you're paying easily over $100. You
Oh,
don't
yeah.
Normal people can't do that multiple nights in a row, right?
Mm-mm.
Like
Mm-mm.
this is her expectation is bizarre, but she's able to spend it on herself for, well, we'll see where she made her money. She made her money in the adult entertainment industry.
She
Um,
did?
not as an
Wow.
entertainer. Not as an entertainer, though. Actually, the guy who
Interesting.
she met in the previous one, I've cut some bits out of this. She met him at the Playboy Mansion, but she used to manage like marketing and PR for them.
Okay,
But it
interesting.
gives her an interesting perspective and an entirely wrong perspective, but it is a perspective that many women have. She goes, I spent over a decade behind the curtain of digital desire as the custodian of records for Playboy and its affiliated hardcore properties, including sites like Spice TV. I was responsible for some of the most infringed upon adult content in the world. I worked closely with copyright attorneys and marketing teams to understand exactly what it took to get a man to pay for content he could otherwise find for free. We knew what worked. We knew how to frame a face, a gesture, a moment of implication, just enough to ignite a fantasy and open a wallet. I came to understand in exact terms what cues tempt the average 18 to 36-year-old cis heterosexual male, what drew him in, what kept him coming back. It wasn't intimacy, it wasn't mutuality, it was access to stimulation, clean, fast, and frictionless. And we'll get to a bit more of what she thinks on this, but I think here you can already see she doesn't understand at all. She doesn't understand that things like, for now, this isn't true for some religious men. Some religious men really don't use porn, don't masturbate, and this is a huge part of their sex lives and their identity. And it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
But there's another population of men out there who masturbate and use porn and have totally normal relationships. And that this is not what a man is getting from this content isn't what he's getting from going on a date from you. This is a completely different set of emotional stimuli that he would be masturbating by taking a fancy woman to a fancy restaurant. You are just you have emotionally protected yourself by saying what he's choosing instead of me is porn. And that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Many men who would have dated you regardless. In fact, a woman like this, given that she's not like a religious whatever, no man who dates this woman isn't watching porn. I'm just going to be a 50 plus woman with kids who likes casual sex in her 50s. Every single man she has ever interacted with in a positive context sexually in her entire life regularly watches porn, and I can guarantee that. It reminds me of a study they did, I think it was in Canada or whatever. They were trying to compare men who regularly watch porn and men who don't on something, and they couldn't find enough men who actually didn't watch porn for the sample set to work because it was so rare unless there was like a high extremist religious exogenous motivation to prevent it. But the point I'm making here is these men are not choosing porn over you. They are choosing something else over you. They are choosing not to go on this because of something else. The porn is filling an entirely different need than the fancy date at a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you think that the fancy date at a restaurant was a precursor to sex, and sex is what porn is competing with, which again, I disagree with that narrative as well. Porn is one thing, sex is another thing. You might be able to have sex less because you have access to porn, but that's only going to happen when both partners want that or something, right? Like, or unless you have some severe addiction or something, which, as we've talked about in the Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality, almost never happens to people who think porn is normal. Porn addictions pretty much only happen to people who have a strong religious or ideological aversion to pornography. This isn't saying that that's wrong. As I've looked into the data more my actual intuition around this is that it might be an evolved thing. It might be that individuals born in cultures that have a strong ideological aversion to pornography never evolved any sort of way of dealing with it. So it might actually be that Mormon men genuinely can't have normal relationships and engage with something like pornography.
Huh.
Or extremist versions of some religious beliefs. Like they just may never have had to engage with this, and so when they engage with it, they just become completely obsessed with it and can't have normal relationships. Which fine, I'm not gonna push against the, if that's what your culture tells you, then stick with it. But what I'm saying is, of the men who this woman thinks are normal, all of them are engaging in porn. Now, to go further here, in that world, there's no need for conversation, no need for effort, no curiosity, no reciprocity, no one's feelings to consider, no vulnerability to navigate, just a closed loop of consumption. And I'm like, yeah, but all of those things you mentioned are things that men like. Men like conversation and effort and curiosity and reciprocity and vulnerable women. These are things they like on a date, okay? I enjoy those things when I'm dating a woman. So no, porn isn't delivering any of that to me. It is just that I know that I'm not going to get those things from you. I know, as we read further, if I go on a date with a woman like you, there is going to be there's no need for effort because you're a desperate 50-year-old woman with kids. You're not going to be genuinely curious in me. You're going to expect some sort of anti-Trumper narrative. You're going to want me to be like you. You aren't really going to consider my feelings, and I'm not really going to consider your feelings because we're not actually interested in something long-term together. And you're certainly not going to be vulnerable with me, and so I'm not going to need to navigate that. Right? Like, what you haven't realized is you think that it is porn that has stripped all of this from who you are, when it is you that stripped all of this from who you are. And it is the progressive culture, the woke culture, that stripped it all from who you are. What struck me the most wasn't the extremity of the content, because as we pointed out, male porn really isn't that extreme in most cases. It was the emotional vacancy behind it. The drift, that women want men, this to you is emotional vacancy, because as Simone has pointed out, that is the normal form of male porn. The way men had quietly withdrawn from intimacy and vulnerability. You don't want an intimate and vulnerable man, first of all, right? Like, not with violence.
Although it seems to be a progressive narrative. Like it would seem to me that many women are being told by therapists or society or influencers that they should want men who are emotionally vulnerable,
but they don't. Which
they don't. Like intuitively and subconsciously they don't, but societally they think they should, and therefore demand it and complain about any absence of it.
Yes.
So regardless, they're going to be unsatisfied because they either think societally that they're being robbed of some emotionally available man, but then if they actually become emotionally available, then they get the ick.
They don't want that man anymore. Yeah. Not with violence or resistance, but with indifference. They weren't sitting across from someone on a Saturday night trying to connect. They were scrolling, dabbling, disappearing behind firewalls, filters, and curated personas. And while they disappeared, women continued to gather, to tend, to notice who wasn't arriving, and to show up anyway.
Please, women are scrolling just as much, if not more.
Right, but they're all targeting the same men, and they're finding they can't get those men, right? Like the fact that the average woman is scrolling right, the average man gets scrolled right on by less than 1% of women shows that you're just not being honest with yourself, right? Like you're targeting a very narrow group of men, and worse, you are going to these dating environments, these fancy restaurants, you are treating yourself, and you are thinking, well, if I went 50-50 with a man at a place like this, I'm doing him a favor, right? Like I'm pulling my weight. And what you're not realizing is, no, you're not, because this environment was never in any way about the man. It was about making you feel good about yourself. And that's when men withdrew from parasitic dating culture. You see the fancy restaurants be the first thing that empty of men. Because taking women to a fancy restaurant was not 50% for the man and 50% for you just because you were both eating. They can make fancy macaroni and cheese at home and it tastes just as good. This is about your self-image. And men realizing they don't want to play that game and it's not worth it for them.
Yeah. And my other experience as a kid at fancy restaurants as well, which might have propped up the industry. Because also I noticed like some stats, just restaurant industry wide, that 2025 is now like lower than 2023. Like there has been also some kind of peak, and now there's a dropping demand for restaurants. That all of the fancy restaurants I'd been to as like before the age of 24 were on business trips, and they were all related to sales. So maybe also there's just less of that sales, whining, and dining taking
That's
place.
True.
As I think
Well,
sales
that
is
was mostly
fundamentally
in East
changing.
Asia where you did that.
Asia, but also Europe and also the United States. But I just don't think it's playing out that same way.
Oh, that's true for us as well. Yeah, when we go to fancy restaurants, it's almost always tied to our business.
Yeah, like investment or sales or something like that. And I think now these decisions are being made differently.
And we used to go on like anniversary dates to fancy restaurants, but we stopped.
Well, I think
Like-
because we realized we were doing it because we thought that was what you're supposed to do, but neither of us really enjoyed it. So
I've been recently trying to look to buy some haggis, by the way, because I want to have like more fun dishes I like at home. And it's so expensive to ship. I can't bring myself to get it. I can't buy a meat if the shipping costs more than the meat.
I know. It's brutal.
Like that's what I'm like. Maybe I'll get like $100 of frozen haggis and ship it, and then we can have it over a series of nights. That's all I can think. Because I mean, it's ridiculous.
We'll just need to fly to Scotland.
You can't bring it back to the US because they don't allow lungs. Haggis I'm
Oh.
getting in the US is like fake.
So it's not even real haggis? Don't bother.
Oh, come on. I need to eat haggis, Simone.
It's true. It's so good. It's so good.
Okay, anyway, to continue here. I'm 5'4". I've been dating since the mid-'80s. Been married, been a mother, gotten divorced, had many relationships, long and short. Well, I'm sure that recommends you to new guys. I remember when part of heterosexual male culture involved showing up with a woman to signal something. Status, success, desirability. Women weren't signifiers of values, even to other men. It wasn't always healthy, but it meant that men had to show up and put in some effort.
That's so interesting because now often, like when we host cocktail parties and stuff, if someone wants to bring a partner, it's like, ugh, like great. Now sometimes the partners turn out to be cool, but typically when a man brings a female partner, she's an embarrassment to him. And it's an issue. And with dialogue, for example, that secret society, one of the things that was like really distinct about dialogue is most of these secret societies of like luminaries and ideas festivals allowed spouses to attend. And one thing that dialogue did very distinctly was either completely not allowed significant others to attend, or if they were allowed to attend, you had to pay a ton of money for them, but they could only come to one dinner. And they weren't allowed to go to any of like the other things, because it's now understood that like in many cases female partners are just really disappointing and like we don't want to see them. Like they're only going to make you look worse. So that's crazy that she thinks that, because when I hear that, like, can I bring a spouse? Can I bring a significant other? Like that's typically only going to make.
Well, I'm going to point out that this isn't true for every population. So, you know, when I look at my parents' generation, you go to the Bohemian Grove or something, they don't allow women. And the reason they don't allow women is because men of that generation dated bimbos, like literally just hot women who were meant to be wives. And if you look at the men who are still dating in their 40s and in the urban monoculture, you see this as well. But you don't see this of the men who are dating to marry. Like the men who date to marry, typically their wives are very competent and cool people. Like all of our friends, males who got married young, generally got married to super smart, really competent, very good conversationalist women. And
it's not uncommon at dialogue for two people who are married to both be nominated and both attend. So married couples are there, but they both get there on their own merit.
But the point I'm making about these women is one thing you'll often notice about them is they are not top lookers. And men who date for marriage typically marry in their 20s, which is another reason why she's not finding the good men, because they're already married. Like I want a guy who will care.
Well, she's dating men on their second marriage, you know, like the guy she was mentioning.
A man should only be on his second marriage if his wife died. You know, otherwise there's a problem with either him or the woman, right? You know, but or his discernment even, you know, even if it's not, you know, but the point I'm making here is one of the things I keep seeing within these communities is great spouses who you would want to bring along and that you use as a status symbol, but the way they are used as a status symbol is their conversational ability and their intellect and not their looks. And the problem that you see within the urban monoculture is even for her, you can tell she's optimizing for looks, given that she's on these dating profiles and stuff like this. And the men who are going after her because she's, casually sleeping with people, she has kids, she doesn't appear to be looking for marriage. If you're in that sort of dating market, you're going to be optimizing around looks. You are not going to get a guy like me. You are not going to get a guy like the other guys I know who are in long-term relationships. And the other guys I know in long-term relationships, often I'd actually say that there is an inversion. Now, what you don't want is an ugly wife. I know no men with ugly wives, but who I consider in this category. But typically, the homelier their wife, the more interesting she is. Whereas the less homely she is, and when I say homely, what I mean is completely effable, but also not going to turn a bunch of heads when you look into a room. Like she doesn't look like
5 or 6. Yeah.
And it's because these men know what to actually optimize for. And I think that that's why you've seen men no longer, because nobody is impressed anymore. And a lot of the market hasn't adopted to this by you bringing a 10-10 model into a room, especially
Well,
if you're
also
in your
because
50s.
these days being a 9 or a 10 as a woman doesn't necessarily indicate signs of genetic fitness because there's so much manipulation going on, like the contouring, the fillers.
Well, I mean, and it just
procedures.
looks trashy. Like consider Jeff Bezos' current girlfriend. Like she looks
Wife, they're getting married soon.
wife, but she looks trashy. I'm going to be honest. She looks trashy compared to the other billionaires' wives. And it's not a good look. Like, I don't know. I think it's because he's the previous generation and he doesn't realize how trashy she looks.
Could be. Yeah.
And I'm
In
not
fact, it
saying
seems
you
like she
can't
got
like
most
her.
of her work done after she met him. She actually looked pretty normal before, which is also super weird.
Gross.
Yeah.
Really? Because her work is terrible.
I know, but I almost wonder if he's been driving it because, yeah, she looked pretty normal before.
He just needs to not do work and dress her like a normal human. And
Remember, he also physically modified himself a lot. So he might have some very strong opinions about what he wants for both himself and his partner. And they're sort of like outdated cartoon versions. So it's my theory.
It's not a bad theory, but it is gross. I mean, like it
Hey,
lowers
he's
the
enjoying
status
it.
every time he walks in a
Good
room.
for him. Good for him. He's happy.
I mean, it's not that he couldn't do it. It's not innate to who she is. She could not dress like that when she goes to fancy events.
Yeah. And she was also very beautiful before. It's not like she needed this.
But to continue, I recently experienced a flicker of possibility with James. We met on Rihanna, the dating app. There
Never
was
heard of
something
that.
mutual from the start. Wordplay, emotional precision, a tone that felt attuned. It was brief, but it caught light.
Okay.
I remember saying to him, even fleeting connections matter when they're mutual and lit from the inside. And I meant it. What a sad thing to say to somebody who you're interested in. Even if you talk to me for just a little bit, I'll pay attention. Oh God, somebody pay attention to me. There was just enough spark to wonder what might unfold, enough curiosity to imagine a doorway, but he didn't step through it. Not with a plan, not with presence. He hovered, flirting, retreating, offering warmth, but no direction. Sexual tension and a spark aren't enough to sit still and hope. There's substance behind the shimmer. So I named what I felt. I texted him clearly, with care, not simply to declare attraction, but to extend a real invitation to explore what was possible. Oh God, that sounds so gross. I didn't chase. I invited, leaving the door open. If he ever wanted to cross that threshold, not just to take, but to meet, I was willing. I wanted. I still do. Imagine reading this about yourself. He never replied. He still follows my Instagram stories. One of those small gestures of passive engagement that so many of us mistake for closeness. Who mistakes that for closeness? It was like interest. It feels like silence. There are 1,000 Jameses. I have known dozens. The arc varies, but the undertow is familiar. This is
I didn't know you could know who follows your Instagram stories. She is really self-involved. If you're like that, like grasping at those levels of straws. Wait, how do I honestly don't know. I don't know how people know this.
You don't
How
know
do
how
you know?
you know who's following your Instagram stories? You haven't
Yeah.
stalked
Oh, you know what? I don't
people?
post Instagram stories. That's probably one of the reasons. Because
Yeah.
nobody cares. Oh my
But
God.
she cares. This is how she judges if the world still cares about her. Is that
Wow.
guy I flirted with on a dating app still liking my stories?
Oh, that's dark.
Right?
Yeah. That's yeah.
The urban monoculture takes all and leaves nothing. Always remember that. The guys who think they can still date at this age, it is just as bleak for you. Guys just don't tell on themselves as much. Find a partner and lock it down, even if she's homely.
I think maybe I'm surprised she hasn't mentioned that, like, the high caliber men that she seems to be pursuing, who appear to both, like, a man who will do it for her is presumably in his 50s, attractive and wealthy, highly educated. Okay.
Yeah.
Those men are dating women in their 20s. Because
They're not, they're not dating women in their 50s.
So I don't know why she's not mentioning that, because
Well, a lot of women do. They freak out about it. They shame it. That's how they try to reclaim the marketplace. And we're seeing this more and more within our
that's
culture.
not going to work. That's not going to work.
What I won't entertain is directionless orbiting, the thing so many men now seem to mistake for connection, the perpetual maybe. They don't mistake this for connection. They're using you for sex. How do you not see
Or
this?
they're really not that into you. They're not interested and they're there. And
yeah,
when
I'm
you
doing this with a girl, I am
text
not
them and make
interested in marriage,
about
right?
themselves.
Like,
I'm sure these men, like the man that she was like, I want a connection. Like, I'm sure it felt kind of good to him. Maybe he got a little creeped
you
out.
shouldn't be like dating people who aren't interested in marriage. I don't care if you're 50. I don't care if you're not. If you were a widowess, right, and you were looking
but
for
you're
a new
forgetting
guy,
just how
I'm
many
sure you'd
people
lock
feel like
down.
they need sex for validation.
True. The emotional check-ins, the casual seeing where it goes without ever engaging anywhere. We call it a situationship, but mostly it's avoidance, an abdication of ownership. Ownership of you. Like, this is what you need is ownership, but you are unwilling to give that. Of feeling, of behavior, of sex that isn't a means to an end, but is a communion. How can it be a communion if it's casual, like the type that you want? Like
I don't know what she wants. I don't know what she wants because she's describing a
marriage.
mystical experiment. No, she's not. She doesn't want commitment. She doesn't want marriage. She wants something. What this like poetic language about connections and sparks and stuff. She wants
What is it like
new relationship energy? Is that it?
No. What's that book about?
Limerence?
About traveling and having sex with
Oh,
people?
Eat, Pray, Love.
Eat, pray, love. What she wants is eat, pray, love. There was a time not so long ago when even one night stands might end with tangled limbs and a shared breakfast. When the act is that was because you were younger then and men felt they needed to do more to keep you.
I think this is why so many women go to Cuba for the male sex workers, because they can at least pay for that kind of experience if they need it.
When the act of staying the night didn't announce a relationship, just a willingness to be human for a few more hours. Oh, she doesn't even want sleeping with guys to mean a relationship. She just wants eggs. Now, even that kind of unscripted contact feels rare. We've built so many boundaries that we've walled off the very few moments that make connection memorable. And frankly, morning sex is often the best sex.
Ew.
Sometimes you even get a side of eggs before you disappear from their bed and their life forever. So that's what she wants. But this is, again, I think, a thing that women missed. The men who can get sex easily, like from the period of my life where I could, morning sex with a woman, sleeping over with a woman, making her food, that's all for her.
Oh.
That's like if I'm a guy and I'm just taking,
I thought women thought morning sex was stressful because, like, you either have to wake up and sneakily brush your teeth and try to not look so gross, or you're
the whole thing is a for her phenomenon, right? Like, it is. Yeah, look, you might be like, oh, like, as a guy, if I'm having casual sex, right? Like, I just want to go have casual sex and then leave.
Go to sleep. Have a good night's sleep without the snuggles.
Spending the night, additional sex in the morning, making food. That's all things I do so you don't feel used. I mean, and I did that with most girls because I didn't want them to feel used. I didn't want them to feel bad. but I wasn't doing that for me. And I think she has normalized so many parts of the sexual exchange as being completely mutual without realizing that they were 100% a pageant for the woman. So the woman didn't feel bad about the decision she was making. And I think that that's what we're seeing here. What she's saying is men do not do the pageant.
I imagine she's romanticizing elements of her youth that she's relived and through memory so many times that she's overridden it, and she's not even remembering real things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, when she was in her 20s or whatever, of course guys, kept her over and made her food and were romantic with her and everything. She wasn't a 50-year-old woman with kids, or a kid, even sadder.
It was like what, the 80s then? The 70s? So men were maybe a little more traditional too.
I mean, she said she dated in the 80s, so
okay, so the 80s, yeah. See 2 lines of cocaine and have fun together. All I can think about the 80s is like shoulder pads, cocaine, neon colors.
But I think it's sad because it's a degree of this dating culture and casual sex culture where I think women got the perception that all casual sex culture was for men, and they didn't realize how much of it was a show that men were putting on for them. And now the men, because if as we I point out the Tinder statistic, but it also matters for the top men. It means for the top 20 men in an area, they're getting 20 matches a day, right? And these are the men who you likely think are good enough for you. And they can also date women younger than you, remember? So why are they bothering with any of the things that you care about, right? Like eggs in the morning or morning sex or staying over, right? Why aren't they just going home after they've used you for whatever they want to get out of you, right?
Well, I'm just also so surprised that apparently women wanted to stay over. Like when I see it depicted in media, I thought like women kind of feel uncomfortable.
Okay, so you got to understand why women want this. They don't want this because they want the sex or the morning food or anything like that. They want it because they don't want to feel used. And when a woman stays over within popular narratives, or when a man stays over, the woman hasn't been used for sex. It's a fling. When the man has sex and then leaves, that's being used. That is the way they conceptualize it within modern narratives. This isn't about actual pleasure for the woman. This is about the narratives that she's telling herself about the way she is being perceived by the man. And you can see a lot of her complaints are about the way she is being perceived by men.
So it's performative, even though it's not comfortable for anyone involved.
Exactly.
Do you remember where you slept after the first night we had sex?
Couch or something?
On the floor of my living room.
Because I wanted to wake up early.
Because you're a true gentleman. Because you knew.
Oh yeah, you're very autistic about this stuff.
I'm like, I can't.
Did you tell me? And I was just like, okay.
We tried snuggling all night like a couple times, and I think you and I, even then, like we're not
getting any sleep.
Like, yeah, like this is just not that. Like I just sleep better by myself. Can we just set up a bed in the living room for you? Can we just? Yeah. That was you were so accommodating to me, and I really appreciate that you in relationships think like what is actually going to make my female partner happy instead of what are the like tropes or like what's traditional. But then apparently there's women out there like this woman who, despite being very experienced in terms of sex and relationships, is still deluding herself into thinking that she wants things that.
Well, she's completely on urban monocultural autopilot. Like this is a no self-reflection individual. No, I mean, because she's not looking for another husband. If she had any sort of cultural framing, that's what she would be looking for.
And she doesn't mention that these men are just dating 20-year-olds anywhere.
Nope, none of that complaining.
Maybe she just conveniently doesn't see that. Maybe she thinks they're fathers and daughters. Bless her. I don't see any dating. There's just all of these fathers taking out their daughters for what must be their 21st birthdays.
Well, I think men who date younger women now, they don't go out to restaurants as much either anymore because there's not a point. The young women are showing off on Instagram and stuff.
Mhm.
And there's easier ways to do that. Take her to your nice apartment or whatever.
Yeah, order food at your nice apartment. Totally.
Mhm.
And it saves money. And then like I mean, also yeah, if you are
Higher
wealthy,
probability of sex too.
totally, because she's already at your place. Yeah, and if you're wealthy, you have a nice apartment, so you can impress her even more with your power. You can conveniently have sex very easily. And also, I think men who are wealthy and successful financially at that age are also, if they still have their money, they're frugal, meaning that like they see the value and maybe, you know, if even if they're not cooks, like most men can cook one thing to impress someone else or
Yeah.
just make food for themselves. So like they make the one thing they know how to make. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I am curious what the 20-year-olds dating 50-year-olds date experience is like.
Okay. Maybe we're between paradigms, mourning what has fallen, not yet fluent in what comes next. The infrastructures of intimacy, slowness, curiosity, accountability have been eroded by haste, convenience, and a kind of sanctioned emotional retreat. Not a sanctioned, the men just have nothing to gain from these
Well,
relationships.
and they're having deep, intimate, very emotionally strong bonds with ChatGPT.
Right? It's
It's
not about
happening.
blaming men. It's about noticing the imbalance, about grieving what's not meeting us, and about refusing to dress it up as a personal failure when it's actually a collective reality. No, it's a collective personal failure. That is what you are missing here.
I just can't
So
imagine living life as this woman lives it. Like this like very poetic, emotional, like it seems that she lives in emotions.
she does. Well, let's tie out the end of this.
Okay.
So here's what I'll say. You are missed, not just by me, but by the world you once helped to shape. We remember you, the version of you that lingered at the table, that laughed from the chest, that asked questions and wanted for answers, that touched without taking, that listened, really listened when a woman spoke. I'll reword that for you. When a 20-year-old woman spoke. You are
Listen,
not
listen.
the men are still here for the 20-year-olds. Let me tell you what. You are not gone, but your presence is thinning in restaurants, in friendships, in the slow rituals of romantic emergence. You've retreated, not into malice, but into something softer and harder all at once. Avoidance, exhaustion, disrepair. Maybe no one taught you how to stay. Maybe you tried once and it hurt. Maybe the world. You divorced a guy, you turd. What do you mean, maybe? This is like a woman with a gun, and there's like a guy bleeding out on the floor, and she's like, I understand that some women hurt people. It's like, well, you shot that guy. Like, and she goes, it's not my fault. Well, you chose to marry him. You chose to have a kid with him. You did this to your kid. Like, clearly it's a little your fault, right? Like, you're not blameless here, lady. Maybe the world told you that your role was to provide, to perform, to protect, and never to feel. But here's what's real. We never needed you to be perfect. We just needed you to be with us, not above, not muted, not masked, just whiz. I can promise you, any guy who's reading this is like, I do not want to be with whatever this is, because clearly you're using me to jack off some self-perception you have of being wanted and having companionship. And I don't want to play that role, right? You know, I want somebody who does admire me. And here you're saying, we don't want someone who's above us. Well, a guy wants you to admire them. You jack off. Like, of
But
course,
also like
nobody
she just
wants
doesn't
to.
make sense. Like what is all this? I
If,
can't.
if you're not into guys to adore them, like my wife, day one has put me on a pedestal, and that's a big part of why I like being married to her. You hear her saying, "Oh, I would never put a guy on a pedestal." Of course, what guy wants to date a woman who sees him as an equal? What woman wants to date a guy she sees as her equal or beneath her? Very few. I think that there's this perception within the urban monoculture, because they've repeated this lie so many times, of I really don't care if I admire a guy and think that he's. You do. I promise you, you do. Why did you divorce guy number one? you know? And you can still come back, not by becoming someone else, but by remembering what connection feels like. Oh, they're remembering that with 20-year-olds. When it's honest and slow, when it's earned and messy and sacred. We're still here. Those of us willing to co-create something true. We are not impossible to please. We are not asking for performances. We are asking for presence, for courage, for breath and eye contact, and the ability to say, I'm here and I don't know how to do this perfectly, but I want to try. Come back, not with flowers or fireworks, but with willingness, with your whole beautiful, imperfect heart. We're still here and we haven't stopped hoping. As for me, I'll keep showing up, not because I'm waiting, but because I know what it feels like when someone finally arrives.
This sounds like, it reminds me of that female trope of a woman being mad at her boyfriend and being like, you know what you did. You know, and he's like, what did I do? You know.
I'm gonna know what it feels like. No, but I honestly say,
I don't know what to do. Like, I do not know what this woman wants. If I'm a man and I'm like, I genuinely don't know what she wants. Although someone was just texting.
No, I know what she wants. I'll tell you what she wants.
Okay, what does she want?
She wants the type of guy who any of our happily married women friends are married to. She wants, no, I promise you, she wants a guy who treats her on dates the way I treat you. She wants a guy who treats her like, think about like Raffi and Charlotte. She wants a guy to treat her the way Raffi treats Charlotte. She wants a guy, who's that young couple who got married in Texas?
Oh, Gwen and Ronnie.
No, Glenn and Ronnie. She wants a guy to treat her the way that Ronnie treats her. No, but then there's the other couple, the entrepreneur couple, where the woman is a nurse and the guy is a...
Oh, Alex and Katie. Yeah.
Alex and Katie. She wants a guy to treat her the way Alex treats Katie. She wants, like, in every one of these instances, she wants a guy to treat her the way that guys who get married in their...
There seems to be this whole, like, emotional connection. We just love each other as humans. We're just human together.
No. And this is the thing. Would not these women, right? Like these other women who are in relationships, right? She's like, I just want a connection. You know, you don't need to bring me flowers. You don't need to bring me fireworks. You don't need to make me feel like the most special woman on earth every day. And what's ironic is that these women who did settle down and get married and who have families, they do have the man bring them flowers regularly or fireworks regularly if that's what they want, or make them feel like the most special woman on earth, you know, every day. Maybe not every day a week, but more often than not. And this is what I see in the young couples who get married, right? Like,
yeah, they're so sweet. It's so nice.
No, they're also sweet. This thing that she's like, well, I understand it's too much to ask for all of this. It's like, no, all of that stuff that you think that is too much to ask for, that's what you should have been looking for in husband number one, rather than urban monoculture simp who's disposable. Okay? And this is the problem, right? You come to women at a certain age and you're like, it just gets so hard at this age, right? Like you have to make so many sacrifices. You're basically looking for a widower at this point, right? And you are looking for marriage if that's what you want. Why would a man treat you like you're on a pedestal and like you're the most special woman in the world if he doesn't plan to marry you? Right? Like, do you want him to fake some sort of connection? If he has the feelings for you that you're describing you want him to feel for you, he should want to marry you. So why isn't that the first thing you're talking about?
And she's loudly signaling that's not what she wants.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Well, I mean, and she also isn't going to be desirable to the type of guy who wants that because of her life choices. And this is all, you know, this should be seen as the cry, not to men out there, but young women who are making the same choices that she is, you know, Sex in the City, I think, is a really good example of this, because that is what her generation was weaned on, to think, oh, the group of girls who goes to a fancy restaurant together is actually still classy. The Jennifer Parker,
Sarah Jessica Parker,
who wrote this and did everything.
She didn't write it, but she had a lot of editorial influence.
A lot of editorial in season. She said, "I wish I had just gotten married."
Yeah, the writer of the series, who wasn't Sarah Jessica Parker.
Oh, it wasn't? Okay, the writer of the series, the head writer.
regret
that she hadn't made these decisions. The one who sold all of this to you has said, this was a giant mistake and I deeply regret my life choices. I should have just gotten married and had kids. That, unfortunately, is where we should all be. You shouldn't have time to be thinking about dating unless you're thinking about who's going to be the next parent for my kids. And that's the funny thing that she's not looking for here. When my mom dated after my mom and dad got divorced, the only thing she ever talked about in terms of who she was dating was how good of a parent to her kids that person was going to be.
confirmed.
That was 100% her focus. And this individual, that doesn't even seem to be relevant. She's interested in the sex and the personal connection and everything like that.
Yeah, what is this for me emotionally? Not even like in terms of logistical life benefit. Who can I be with in old age? Who can I build security with in old age? Who can be a good additional adult figure in my kid's life? No. It is just who can emotionally indulge me for fun things.
No, if you died, for example, that would be what I was looking for. That is what I would be vetting for.
A mother replacement for our kids.
Who's going to be a good mom for my kids?
The Maria to your Baroness von Trapp.
Well, no, and people can be like, oh, well, that's so dehumanizing to a woman. Not even. If I went on a date,
no, I want my kids to be okay for sure. No, like, and I've told Malcolm that if I die, he is not looking for a wife. He is looking for a woman who would love our kids and take good care of them.
But not just that. And keep in mind, there are great pronatalists who have done this. Catherine Pockalock, who wrote Hannah's Children.
Yeah, she came into a marriage with a man who already had 6 kids, and then she had 8 more.
And the previous wife had died, by the way. Well, widower, right? So again, not like his fault, right? Like, but if a woman was dating me, and this is the thing where people are like, oh, like a woman who has a lot of kids, like you'd never want to marry. Look, if I have a lot of kids and I'm dating a woman who has a lot of kids because like her husband died or something.
Brady Bunch, super wholesome.
Right.
Totally.
And this woman is vetting me. Like if she's like date number 1, she's like, look, I've got, 3, 4, whatever kids. And I want to be honest, I am primarily vetting you, not based on how I feel about you, but how good of a dad you're going to be.
Yeah.
That to me is positive points.
Yeah. That is like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously now. 100%.
Yeah. I'm like, this is clearly a woman with her head screwed on straight. And I want my kids to have a good parent.
And society, again, a society super condones that. That is what the Brady Bunch is all about. Like people are into
Well, it used to. Can you imagine the horror of on a current date, you're like, to be honest, my wife died and I'm just really looking for a good, household manager and wife to
well, okay, in like 90s rom-coms that would show up every now and then.
But today it'd be seen as bad. To her, that's all tangential. It's all about the personal connection.
I don't know. I was so like, I grew up so much on The Sound of Music, and like Maria, this nun who comes to take care of Captain Von Trapp's kids, falls in love with the kids first, really. Like that's the dream. That's like, if that's what I hope happens if I die, that, some woman just freaking loves our kids and like then comes to love you too.
But that used to be the norm. That not weird.
Benjamin Franklin was the last son of like a lot of kids. I can't remember if it was like 10 or 16 or a ton. But that was his father's second wife, maybe third. Like this is a fairly normal format, at least in past successful lineages and families, but whatever.
Anyway, love you to death, Simone. Thank you for making me kids. You're working on it right now, kid number 5. And thank you for making me dinner. We are doing another night of the vermilion things. Are you making more sauce tonight, right?
I have more sauce. I made 3 servings of sauce. Unless I'm going to make a new batch, and I can't.
No, continue to use the sauce batches that you made.
Okay.
But add another lime to it because it doesn't have enough lime.
Okay, I'll add more lime, and I'll do a new.
Or maybe just add like a lime wedge to the side, and I can.
Do you want to do some of the salad? Do you want a little more greenery or not?
Yeah, more greenery. So
okay,
half salad, half vermillion noodles.
Vermicelli.
And cut down the vermilion noodles you're using a ton.
Vermicelli. Okay, I will do that.
Really?
You're not going to let that go, are you? Okay. I love you so much.
Hey, I'm so glad we're not this person. There was that really sad tweet by Homath. where
Oh.
friend of the show, and he's like, look, I'm in my 40s, I'll never be married, I'll never own a home, I'll never have a normal relationship. And I'm like, damn, man. Like,
Well, a home that meets, I mean, like, he was kind of couching that in like, maybe he had really high standards, because he was like, I will never be able to build the home I want or customize a home to make it the way I like. So maybe it's, he's like your dad, and he's like, well, I need like a swimming pool that goes into my bedroom.
I think a lot of people, when they saw our home mess episode, they thought that the reason I focused on like, how can we get around the current societal crisis was because I wanted to shill his product. And the real reason I did that is I just wanted him to say something optimistic, because so much of his content is really like, the world's broken and there's no way around it.
At least he's helped a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, I think his choice to orient his audience around, don't hyper focus so much on what you want for yourself, but what you can give to the world. And I think he has that orientation for himself as well. But he, who's not above a moment where we slip and have a little self-pity?
No, but I mean, he's providing this mindset to people younger than him who can hopefully act on it. I mean, now he's a famous YouTube personality, but who knows when he was marrying age, like early 30s and 20s, if he was.
Yeah. I mean, he only just skyrocketed. He only just found the success. And he also, like, I think at one point lost 100 pounds. So like, yeah, he may have been just systematically in a terrible position for his dating years.
But I mean, I'm worried about the other young influencers we know, like Pearl Davis is still single. Ruby Art is still single, like.
Yeah, they gotta nail it down.
Did you know, I didn't know this, Chris Williamson is married and has a kid.
All right. Okay. That's good.
I didn't know. That's good. That's good.
I hope Tim Ferriss has found his person, because he's been like, I mean, I sort of stopped listening to his podcasts after he released Cock Punch. I don't know. He knew
what was Cock Punch? What is it?
It was like a whole fantasy world about chickens, roosters. I didn't get it. Some people got it. Okay. I didn't get it.
Is this my AI fantasies that you can get on Patreon? Where
no, those are fun. Those are little
AI
like short fun. No. He was like really into it, like the character design and the extended fictional universe of these roosters.
I get really into my fantasy worlds.
But they're not roosters. You're playing with genres that are fun and tropes that are repetitive and comforting, but with a slightly different slant, which is exactly what you want from everything, right? Like Twilight, but make it a rich guy who's into BDSM, or, like it's just like, Uber, but make it for clothing. And, like, Cock Punch was just a little too. But anyway, before that, he kept talking about how he really wanted to become a dad, and he was researching it, and he was trying to do all these things and get healthy and find the right partner.
And then he wrote a book about chickens.
Yeah.
As an alternative. He could have found a partner at his level of wealth.
Well, then he had, like, for a long time, he had a really awesome girlfriend, and then I think it just didn't work out with her. And I think he was dating other people. I mean, who knows what's going on in his personal life, but that's another influencer who I'm like, oh, come on, man. Like, you're going to be, he'd be a great dad. At least Chris Williamson has his person. He seems like he'd be a great dad. Like, he seems like one of those guys who might actually
really good dad. No, actually, like, of all the influencers I know, he seems like he'd be the best dad.
But also, like, I could see him being like, 10% of men are like baby men who like actually like babies and infants. They're like, oh, let me hold it. Like, I could see him like, all like muscly, wearing one of those like kangaroo shirts, just walking around with a little infant. I like, it's a thing I could see, but maybe not. Who knows?
I'm going to be honest. I almost never, from like the conservative male influencers who are just like pure conservative, not like Chris Williamson or something, or Razib Khan, where they're like playful conservative. I never get good dad vibes from them. I'm like,
Razib Khan's a total dad.
I said not like the playful conservative.
Oh, unlike them. Okay, so if you're not a playful conservative, if you're like Sargon of Akkad, then
or something like that, I'm like, I would not want to be his kid. Yeah. Like, God, I'd be like,
have your razor blade things gone away yet?
The cuts, that thing, like, it didn't hurt, but it left freaking scars.
My God. Anyway, I gotta go get Octavian.
Love you.
I love you so much. And recording. Okay. Yeah, I get so sad on days when we don't record. I miss
You just sit around crying to yourself when we don't record.
Yeah, like when I had a dentist appointment yesterday, it was like, no.
I'm glad because I have extra time to prep episodes because we've recorded so many backlogs.
I know. I can help on that front. I have some outlines I'm working on.
Well, if we get
So.
accepted into one of these accelerators, we might need a bigger backlog because I'm going to need to be there for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, we'll see. What should happen will happen.
Mm-hmm. God will let us know.
Yeah.
How we are meant to dominate those who would oppose us. What?
You know it. You know it.
I know. All right.